To a person living in a developed country, some familiar activities might be going to the supermarket to buy food, driving to work, going online to make an order for a new pair of shoes with one-day shipping, texting your friends on your smartphone, paying the water and electricity bills, eating a hot dog, separating your recyclable and non-recyclable garbage. These are simple yet essential parts of life for anyone in a developed country, which form a culture of consumerism. It's an all-encompassing lifestyle that goes beyond fulfilling our natural requirements and provides us with the lives of luxury and comfort that were once unimaginable to the common person. We benefit from these resources because the core of our society is based on the ability to do so. There are pleasures and even riches to be gained with these widely attainable commodities, yet to the same extent there are also severe consequences. In this modern world, specifically the United States, our culture of consumerism is shaped around a hierarchy. People aim to reach the top of it by having the most things, or in economic terms, to utilize unlimited amounts of spending power. This culture of consumerism is strengthened by images of wealth and prosperity that influential figures and business tycoons alike display in an unforgiving manner. Ironically enough, it is a similar attitude that is destroying the very vessel of our existence, the planet we live on. Consumerism, primarily through the use of fossil fuels, the consumption of animal products, and the use of plastic, has caused irreversible damage to our planet. The most enduring consequence of them all, climate change, poses not only the biggest threat to natural life on Earth, but also humanity itself. At the time of this video, the rise in global temperatures have resulted in severe droughts, forest fires, and horrendous storms, all of which contribute to humanitarian issues that continue to worsen day by day. The greatest victims are those who live in abysmal poverty, many of whom have already resorted to leaving their homes by a result of problems brought around by the exploitation of our planet. And this is only the tip of the iceberg. So far, the renowned solution for humans to address their environmental damage has been to adopt sustainable consumer practices that continue to provide a life of comfort while reducing environmental impact, thus creating a win-win situation. Consumers keep their lifestyles and the environment heals. Being that almost anyone who grew up in the United States has also grown up with this culture of consumerism, it makes sense not to dismantle the very constructs of our lives in order to preserve the ecosystems of the planet. However, pressing science is demonstrating that the situation is worsening, meaning taking immediate action is vital. With this being said, is sustainable consumerism the most viable answer to address our effect on the environment? Does it have the potential to solve these existential problems? And do the companies we buy from actually care about making a difference? Well, the answer is complicated. In theory, sustainable consumerism is the use of products and services with minimized effect on the environment. On the surface, it appears that our consumer society has adopted many of these sustainable practices. Recycling is widespread. Developments are being made in sustainable energy infrastructure. We're encouraged to buy products with environmentally friendly impacts. Electric cars are becoming practical means of transportation, and plant-based foods are increasing in popularity. However, despite these advancements, sustainable consumerism alone will not be enough to undo the damage that humanity has brought upon our planet. Not only that, but sustainable consumerism as we know it is far from being truly environmentally friendly and does very little to mitigate our impact on the planet. If we are to believe that we have become an environmentally friendly society, then we must do everything we can as consumers to have a minimal impact, meaning what we buy, how we commute, and even how we dispose of our waste must have an extremely low carbon footprint. Yet with many sustainable products, this isn't the case. In fact, mainstream sustainable practices do very little to mitigate an individual's carbon footprint. In a 2012 study analyzing the ecological footprints of Hungarian consumers who demonstrated varied degrees of environmental consciousness, it was found that there was no relationship between environmental awareness and ecological footprint. In fact, the ecological footprint of people varied so greatly that many brown consumers who had little to no interest in sustainable activities had a lower impact than a majority of green consumers who practiced multiple sustainable behaviors. A 2016 study from Germany also found similar results, even demonstrating that wealthier people, despite the notion that they would have the most potential as sustainable consumers, still ended up having a higher ecological footprint due to the greater levels of consumerism. There are many suppositions to the phenomena observed in the studies, one of them being the behavioral impact gap, where the speculative impact of a consumer that they may have about their eco-friendly deeds is much higher than the reality. Despite the altruism that a consumer may feel when practicing sustainable behaviors, this does not equate to a decrease in consumption or carbon footprint. This means that in creating a more sustainable society, there has to be a greater emphasis on the environmental consequences of all consumption habits, not just a select few like recycled plastic or cutting down on energy use. And it is clear why most developed countries fall behind in this aspect. In a study addressing the climate mitigation gap, researchers from the University of British Columbia consider a variety of methods for individuals to reduce their potential greenhouse gas emissions. In the analysis of their research, they found that the most effective methods for individuals to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions were to live car-free, avoid air travel, switch to green energy, buying an energy-efficient car, and switching to a plant-based diet. Unsurprisingly, it was found that the ultimate method to reduce greenhouse gas emissions is to simply have less or no children. This may seem extreme, but it does make sense. Having one less person on this planet to consume its resources removes the potential greenhouse gas emissions that they would contribute to. To put that into perspective, someone in the United States could save approximately 3 tons of carbon dioxide equivalent per year by living car-free, while having one less child in the United States could save a potential of 120 tons of carbon dioxide equivalent making its way into the atmosphere, making it 40 times more effective than the latter. However, this doesn't mean that we have to sterilize all of humanity in order to save the world, since our impact is a result of the modern world we live in. Therefore, our actions to change our society now will be reflected in the environmental impacts of our children. The same study also evaluated what civil administrations, such as school systems and governments, recommended to consumers as effective means to reduce their environmental impacts. In 10 high school science textbooks used among 80% of the Canadian high school population, they found that they failed to mention many of the high-impact actions consumers could take to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions. None of the textbooks suggested having less children or eating a plant-based diet, while half recommended living car-free and only a couple recommended limiting air travel. Government documents similarly left out a lot of important information. In government-issued guides from the United States, Australia, the European Union, and Canada, they found that once again having one less child and eating plant-based diets were never mentioned once, while avoiding commercial flights and living car-free were mentioned sparingly by the documents. On the other hand, actions like purchasing green energy, buying an energy-efficient car, buying energy-efficient products, and recycling and reusing were mentioned throughout all of the literature that was assessed, despite the fact that they have a minimal or inconsistent effect. While it is reasonable that these recommendations are built around our culture of consumerism and not an ultra-environmentalist agenda, it is very clear that the administrations that we adhere to are much more concerned about keeping the consumer culture alive, rather than advocating for serious societal changes that would ensure the well-being of our race and civilization. It is this very attitude which has entrenched our people into environmental degradation, a prioritization of profit over health and the lives of people. Take for instance the motor oil company ExxonMobil. Despite what one may think, Exxon has previously put immense amounts of funding into climate science and research. During the late 1970s, they sought to study the effects of their industry on the levels of carbon dioxide in the environment and what it would spell for the future. What they found was that if their business practices continued, the recently discovered greenhouse effect would heat up the planet's atmospheres and oceans, resulting in adverse consequences such as rising sea levels, forest fires, and droughts, all events that we're seeing today. Despite the pressing findings that their researchers unveiled, ExxonMobil went forward and deliberately downplayed their data in mass publications such as the New York Times. In one article, they even stated that, to those who think industry and nature cannot exist, we say, show a little respect for Mother Nature. On the other hand, they published their analytical findings exclusively into scientific journals, contradicting themselves on 2 different fronts. Due to the dramatic difference between the readership of mass publication and scientific journals, ExxonMobil was able to manufacture a carefree consensus towards human-caused global warming and continued to sell their gasoline to consumers. While it is clear that corporations are not focusing on human welfare, why is it that we still continue to consume products at such drastic levels, despite their negative effect on our planet? And why is it that we give into narratives of sustainability when it is obvious that they don't actually live up to their environmental claims? Because it is how we have been bred to live. As I stated before, consumerism is a culture, and in this culture there is a hierarchy. Despite its limited effects, sustainable consumerism is simply another aspect of the social ladder. We adhere to sustainable consumerism because, much like consumerism itself, it appeals to self-improvement and acts as an opportunity to boost our egocentric altruism. With sustainable consumerism, sustainability is only a secondary objective, while achieving recognition and self-fulfillment is the main priority. This may be really disheartening, however there is no need to resort to hopelessness. We've known for a long time that businesses nor governments will stand up for us. With sustainable consumerism, the burden has been placed on the consumer to solve these existential issues. However, according to a study done by Oxfam, the richest 10% of humans are responsible for almost half of all greenhouse gas emissions. Yet it is many of those same exact people that have coerced politicians into playing their game, and the well-being of the economy has been placed well above that of the people. But as the people, we don't have to play that game. We don't have to give in to the false promises of sustainability, hollow ethics that are simply facades for raking in more profit. While the world around us isn't going to change immediately, we need to consider not only what will happen in our descendants' future, but what will happen in our own future. The solution won't simply come to us. We have to seek it out. Making the right transition into a truly sustainable culture is vital when going forward. But as of now, this advancement that is sustainable consumerism is not enough. We will not be able to save the planet with the very thing that has hurt it. We can only save it through using our ingenuity and compassion as human beings to turn things around. This simply won't be done through one social movement, but generations worth of experience and changes that will allow our civilization to continue to thrive along with the rest of the world.